I can't wait to be your wife once we get rid of the old lady, Calvin. Her pension money will give us such a perfect start in Costa Rica. I heard my daughter's best friend Hazel whisper to my husband of 33 years while I was setting up my own surprise 65th birthday party. The community center floor seemed to shift beneath my feet like the aircraft turbulence I'd managed for 35 years as a flight attendant. Except this time, the emergency was my own life crashing around me. The same hands that had calmed panicked passengers through countless crises began trembling as I processed the casual cruelty in 26-year-old Hazel's voice, the young woman I'd treated like a second daughter for over a decade. Around me, the party decorations I'd been arranging suddenly felt like props in my own humiliation, while 40 family members and friends prepared to celebrate a milestone that was apparently my funeral. The financial advisor transferred another $50,000 yesterday, Calvin replied, his voice filled with the satisfaction of someone successfully stealing a fortune. She still thinks Eugene is helping her plan a secure retirement. Eugene, Hazel's father, the man I'd trusted with my airline pension for 2 years, had been systematically draining my life savings to fund his daughter's affair with my husband. $340,000, my entire career's worth of savings, being stolen by a manipulative young woman who called me mom while planning to destroy my life. Calvin, when are you going to tell her about the divorce? Hazel asked, and I could hear the spoiled entitlement in her voice that I'd somehow missed for years. At the party tonight, in front of everyone, it'll be perfect. She'll be too shocked to fight back, and by the time she recovers, we'll be in Costa Rica with all her money. My name is Phyllis Henderson. I'm 65 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered my husband Calvin and my daughter's manipulative best friend Hazel had been systematically deceiving me while I funded their lies. They thought my maternal generosity made me blind, that my retirement transition made me vulnerable, that my love for Hazel made me an easy target. But what they didn't know was that the same crisis management expertise that had handled airline emergencies for 35 years was about to expose their coordinated betrayal and help me reclaim my independence in ways they never saw coming. If this situation resonates with your soul, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Mom Phil, you're working so hard on the decorations, Hazel said, appearing beside me with that sweet smile I'd fallen for countless times. Let me help you with those streamers. Mom Phil. The name she'd been calling me since she was 16, when I'd taken her on family vacations, paid for her college textbooks, and treated her like the daughter I'd always wanted Jessica to have as a sister. Now I understood it was all manipulation, a calculated performance to gain access to my husband and my pension money. Thank you, sweetheart, I managed, watching her arrange decorations for the party where she and Calvin planned to announce their theft of my entire retirement savings. But it gets worse. I'm so excited about your birthday surprise, Hazel continued, her voice dripping with false affection. Calvin has something really special planned for you tonight. Something special. My own husband was planning to divorce me at my 65th birthday party, in front of 40 family members and friends, while announcing his affair with the young woman I'd loved like a daughter for over a decade. Hazel, you've been like family to me for so many years, I said, testing her reaction while my flight attendant training kicked in. The ability to stay calm during emergencies while gathering critical information. Oh, Mom Phil, you've been more than family to me. You've been everything. Her voice carried that practiced sweetness that had fooled me for years, but now I could hear the manipulation underneath. I don't know what I would have done without your support and generosity. My support and generosity. While she'd been sleeping with my husband and stealing my pension money, Hazel had been accepting my maternal love, my financial help, and my trust in her father's financial planning services. Jessica is so lucky to have you as a best friend, I continued, thinking about my daughter, who had no idea her closest friend was systematically destroying her mother's life. Jessica's been amazing too. She has no idea about how much closer Calvin and I have become. Hazel's smile turned predatory. It's better this way. She won't have to choose sides when everything comes out tonight. When everything comes out tonight, they'd been planning this revelation as entertainment, using my birthday celebration as the stage for my public humiliation, while my daughter watched her best friend steal her mother's husband and life savings. Hazel, how long have you and Calvin been close? I asked, my voice steady despite the devastation building inside me. 2 years, Mom. Phil. Ever since I started having Daddy handle your retirement planning. It's been so romantic, planning our future together while you've been so sweet and supportive. 2 years. For 2 years, this manipulative young woman had been calling me Mom while sleeping with my husband, stealing my pension money, and planning to abandon me with nothing after 33 years of marriage. The woman who'd spent 35 years managing airline crises was standing in the middle of her own emergency, listening to someone she'd loved, like a daughter, casually describe the systematic destruction of her life while preparing for a birthday party that was designed to be her public execution. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly how good flight attendants are at staying calm during emergencies, gathering critical information, and implementing crisis management procedures, even when the emergency involves their own family's betrayal. The next morning, I sat in my home office surrounded by 2 years of financial statements, travel receipts, and family photos that were revealing themselves as evidence of systematic pension theft and generational manipulation. The same methodical approach I'd used to manage airline emergencies for 35 years was now exposing the conspiracy that had stolen my retirement savings and destroyed my understanding of family. Every girls' trip I'd funded for Hazel. Every time Calvin had handled my retirement planning while I worked extra flights. Every expensive gift Hazel had received that didn't match her supposed income. They'd been using my maternal generosity to fund their affair while systematically draining my airline pension. I pulled out my financial records from the past 2 years, detailed documentation I'd kept from my aviation career habit of tracking everything. The pattern was devastating. Every time I'd questioned a large withdrawal from my retirement account, Eugene had immediately provided explanations that made me doubt my own financial knowledge. But it gets worse. I found my travel receipts and cross-referenced them with Calvin's business trips. March 2023, I worked a 3-day international flight to earn extra retirement money. March 2023, Calvin's credit card showed charges for a romantic weekend in Napa with someone who wasn't me. June 2023, I picked up overtime shifts to boost my pension contributions. June 2023, Hazel posted Instagram photos from a luxury spa weekend that I now realized Calvin had funded with my money. They'd been timing their romantic getaways around my work schedule, using my absence to spend the money I was earning for our retirement. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Phil, it's Jessica. I need to talk to you about something weird with Hazel. What kind of weird, sweetheart? She's been acting really strange lately. Secretive about money, talking about moving away, and she keeps asking weird questions about you and Dad's relationship. Yesterday, she asked if I thought you were getting too old to manage your own finances. Too old to manage my own finances. Hazel had been building a narrative with my own daughter about my supposed incompetence while stealing my pension money and planning to marry my husband. Jessica, has Hazel mentioned anything about her father's financial planning business? That's the weird part, Mom. She keeps bragging about how much money her dad is making from his special clients, but when I asked her about it, she got really defensive and said I wouldn't understand the complexities of retirement planning. Special clients. Eugene had been using my pension as his personal ATM while his daughter manipulated my maternal instincts and stole my husband. After I hung up, I called my former colleague Janet, who'd worked with me at the airline for 20 years. Janet, I need to ask you something confidential. When I've talked about my retirement planning, did Eugene Morrison's advice seem sound? Phil, I'm glad you're finally questioning him, Janet said, her voice heavy with concern. How long have you suspected something was wrong? My stomach dropped. Suspected what? About the excessive withdrawals and risky investments. Phil, we've all been worried about how much money you've been pulling out of your pension. Eugene's recommendations don't match anything we learned in our retirement planning seminars. We've all been worried. My own airline colleagues had recognized that my retirement planning was financially destructive, but they'd assumed I was making informed decisions rather than being systematically robbed. Janet, why didn't anyone say anything? Because you're a financial expert from managing airline budgets for decades. We assumed you knew something we didn't about high-yield investments and international property purchases. International property purchases. Eugene had been telling my colleagues that I was making sophisticated investments while actually stealing my money to buy Calvin and Hazel's Costa Rica escape property. But it gets worse. I drove to Hazel's apartment that afternoon, using my spare key that she'd given me for emergencies. What I found made my hands shake with rage. Designer clothes with tags still attached, expensive jewelry, and luxury electronics, all funded by my stolen pension money, while she called me Mom and accepted my maternal love. I found a folder labeled Costa Rica plans, containing property deeds, wedding venue bookings, and a detailed budget showing exactly how much of my pension money they'd allocated for their new life together. $340,000, my entire career's savings, itemized like a shopping list for their romantic escape. But the document that made me physically sick was Hazel's handwritten notes. Phil's getting suspicious about the money. Need to accelerate timeline. Dad says we can drain the last $80K by Christmas if we create another emergency investment opportunity. Calvin thinks we should tell her about the mental decline story to justify the financial control. Mental decline story. They'd been planning to have me declared incompetent to steal the remaining pension money while I was too confused to fight back. I called my attorney, Margaret Chen, who'd handled my will and retirement planning. Margaret, I need to discuss systematic pension theft and elder fraud. Phil, what's happened? My husband has been conducting a 2-year affair with my daughter's best friend, while her father, my financial advisor, systematically stole my $340,000 airline pension to fund their relationship and planned escape to Costa Rica. Jesus, Phil, how much evidence do you have? 2 years of financial records showing systematic theft, documentation of their Costa Rica property purchases using my money, and written plans to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my remaining assets. That evening, Calvin came home with his usual concerned expression. How was your day, sweetheart? You seemed a little confused at the party set up yesterday. Confused. The word they'd been planning to use to justify stealing my remaining pension money while I was supposedly too mentally declined to manage my own finances. I'm feeling very clear about our financial situation, Calvin. Clearer than I've been in years. That's good, but you know how complex retirement planning can be. Maybe you should let Eugene and me handle the details while you focus on enjoying your golden years. Enjoying my golden years. While they stole every dollar I'd saved and planned to abandon me with nothing after 33 years of marriage. Calvin, I've been reviewing our retirement accounts. The investment patterns don't match anything I learned in 35 years of managing airline budgets. His face went pale. Phil, you're overthinking things. Eugene knows what he's doing. Eugene knows how to steal pension money, Calvin, and I'm starting to understand exactly how you and Hazel have been helping him. For the first time in 2 years, Calvin looked genuinely afraid. The confident man who'd been planning my public humiliation looked like someone whose perfect theft conspiracy had been exposed by the woman whose crisis management expertise he'd systematically underestimated. They'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that retirement transition would override 35 years of aviation training in recognizing when emergencies were being deliberately created rather than naturally occurring. That afternoon, at Eugene Morrison's financial planning office, I spread 2 years of pension statements across his desk, under the same fluorescent lights where I'd trusted him with my life savings. But this time, instead of planning my retirement security, I was analyzing evidence of systematic theft that had nearly destroyed my financial future. Phil, these withdrawal patterns are impossible to justify, my attorney Margaret Chen said, her voice tight with professional disgust. No legitimate financial advisor would recommend this level of pension depletion for someone your age. Someone has been systematically stealing your retirement savings. I leaned forward, studying the documentation with the same analytical eye that had managed airline budgets for 35 years. Margaret, look at the timing. Every major withdrawal corresponds with Calvin's business trips and Hazel's luxury purchases. So you're saying they were coordinating the theft to fund their affair? I'm saying Eugene, Calvin, and Hazel have been systematically draining my pension while building a narrative of my mental decline to justify complete financial control. But as I sat in that familiar office, surrounded by evidence I'd been unknowingly documenting for 2 years, something clicked into place that made my blood run cold. This wasn't just about the affair, or even the pension theft. Margaret, can you pull up the timeline when these high-risk investments started? She scrolled through the financial records. Looks like the major escalation began 18 months ago. Why? 18 months ago. 2 weeks after I'd mentioned to Calvin that I was considering working part-time for another airline to boost my pension contributions. 2 weeks after I'd talked about wanting to leave a substantial inheritance for Jessica. 2 weeks after I'd started questioning why our retirement accounts seemed lower than expected. They weren't just stealing my current pension, I said, the realization hitting like a physical blow. They were systematically preventing me from building additional retirement security, so I'd be completely dependent on what they were stealing. Margaret's face darkened. What do you mean? Every time I mentioned working extra flights or boosting my savings, Calvin created investment opportunities that required immediate large withdrawals. They were using my work ethic against me while stealing the money I was earning for our future. But it gets worse. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through text messages I'd found on Calvin's hidden device. Messages between him, Hazel, and Eugene that revealed the true scope of their conspiracy. Look at this, I said, showing Margaret the screen. Eugene texting Calvin, Phil's getting suspicious about the Costa Rica property purchase. We need to create another medical emergency story to justify the next withdrawal. And Calvin's response, Hazel's working on the mental decline narrative. Her psychology degree is finally useful for something profitable. Margaret stared at the messages, her face pale with horror. They were using Hazel's education to manipulate you psychologically while stealing your money. There's more, I said, scrolling to another exchange. Hazel writing, Mom, Phil is so trusting and generous. Sometimes I almost feel bad about taking everything from her. But then I remember how much fun Calvin and I will have spending her money in Costa Rica. Almost feel bad. This young woman I'd loved like a daughter had been calculating the theft of my entire life savings while accepting my maternal affection and calling me Mom. Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Over the past 2 years, when I've discussed my retirement planning, did my financial decisions seem rational? Phil, your original retirement plan was conservative and well-structured. The changes Eugene recommended never made sense for someone with your financial background and risk tolerance. I assumed you had information I didn't about these investment opportunities. The validation hit me like oxygen after months of suffocation. But with clarity came rage. Not the helpless confusion I'd been feeling, but the cold, analytical anger of a professional who'd been systematically manipulated. I want copies of everything, I said, my voice taking on the authority I'd used during airline emergencies. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged authorization, every piece of evidence. What are you planning? For the first time in 2 years, I smiled with genuine confidence. I'm going to do what I've always done, implement emergency procedures to handle a crisis situation. But as I drove home with a folder full of evidence, I realized the scope of their betrayal went even deeper. They hadn't just tried to steal my pension. They'd tried to destroy my financial independence, my relationship with my daughter, and my understanding of family while building their escape plan. The woman who'd spent 35 years managing airline crises had been turned into a victim in her own home. But they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They'd assumed that retirement vulnerability and maternal love would override decades of training in crisis management, budget analysis, and emergency response procedures. They'd treated me like a confused elderly woman instead of what I actually was, an aviation professional with 3 decades of experience detecting exactly the kind of systematic problems they'd been creating. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car, looking at the house where I'd been systematically robbed for 2 years. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the confused, trusting woman they'd tried to create. I was Phyllis Henderson, former senior flight attendant, and crisis management expert. I'd handled airline emergencies, managed passenger conflicts, and coordinated complex international operations. I'd built a substantial pension through expertise and dedication. And now I was going to use every skill I'd ever learned to handle the most important emergency of my career, one that would expose systematic pension theft and recover everything they'd stolen. They thought they were manipulating a naive retiree. They were about to discover they'd been trying to defraud someone who'd made a career of staying calm under pressure and implementing systematic solutions to complex problems. The flight attendant was about to demonstrate exactly how aviation professionals handle emergencies when the threat comes from inside the cabin. The next morning, I did what I'd done for 35 years as a flight attendant. I implemented systematic emergency procedures based on comprehensive preparation and flawless execution. But instead of managing airline crises, I was coordinating the exposure of pension theft that had stolen my retirement savings and nearly destroyed my financial future. My dining room became an aviation-style command center. Financial theft evidence organized by timeline. International property documents sorted by jurisdiction. Communication records arranged by conspiracy level. The same methodical approach that had made me a senior flight attendant was now focused on delivering justice for systematic elder fraud. But I had advantages Calvin, Hazel, and Eugene didn't know about. Margaret, it's Phil. I need to discuss something critical before we proceed with the criminal case. Of course. What is it? I have international assets they don't know about. My airline employee stock options and overseas property investments. $280,000 in assets that they can't access or steal. The silence told me Margaret understood the implications immediately. Phil, that changes everything. You have financial independence they can't manipulate, plus international resources that will complicate their Costa Rica escape plan. International resources. For the first time in 2 years of systematic theft, I had money that Calvin couldn't steal, couldn't redirect to fund his affair, couldn't use to pay for his romantic escape with Hazel. There's more, Margaret. I have airline industry connections in Costa Rica who can verify their property purchases and freeze their assets. My international network includes customs officials, banking regulators, and law enforcement contacts. So you have professional resources they can't anticipate? I have 35 years of aviation relationships spanning multiple countries, plus documentation expertise that's created an unassailable evidence trail of their systematic theft. But it gets worse for them. I called Detective Morrison, who'd handled financial crimes in our county for years. Detective, this is Phil Henderson. I need to report systematic pension theft, elder fraud, and conspiracy to commit international money laundering. Mrs. Henderson, I remember you from the airline. What's the situation? My husband has been conducting a 2-year affair with my daughter's manipulative best friend, while her father, my financial advisor, systematically stole my $340,000 airline pension to fund their planned escape to Costa Rica, where they've purchased property using my stolen money. Jesus, Phil. How much evidence do you have? Complete financial records showing systematic pension theft, international property documentation proving money laundering, recorded conversations between the conspirators and airline industry contacts in Costa Rica who can verify their illegal asset transfers. Can you come in this afternoon? Bring everything. That afternoon, I drove to my former airline headquarters, the place where I'd built my aviation career over 3 decades. What Calvin didn't know was that I'd maintained my professional relationships and industry credentials throughout his systematic theft. Phil, it's wonderful to see you. My former supervisor, Captain Martinez, said, "How are you handling retirement? Calvin mentioned you'd been having some adjustment difficulties." Adjustment difficulties. Calvin had been preparing the narrative for when his theft was exposed, positioning me as someone having retirement problems rather than someone being systematically robbed. "I'm handling retirement very systematically, Captain," I replied, settling into his office chair. "I need your help with a very serious financial crime case." "Of course. What kind of case?" "International pension theft and money laundering. I need expert testimony and industry connections that will hold up in criminal court and international asset recovery proceedings." Captain Martinez's face went serious. Phil, are you saying someone has been stealing your airline pension? I'm saying my husband, my daughter's best friend, and her father have been systematically draining my retirement savings while planning to escape to Costa Rica with stolen money and fraudulent property purchases. But my most powerful weapon wasn't just evidence, it was my aviation network. I called my former colleague Janet, who now worked in airline security. Janet, I need expert consultation on international financial crime and asset recovery. Phil, what's happened? I've been the victim of systematic pension theft with international money laundering. I need professional validation that my financial expertise hasn't declined and that the theft I've discovered represents coordinated criminal fraud. You have it. Phil, you're one of the most competent financial managers I've ever worked with. Anyone who questions your budget analysis skills is either ignorant or complicit. I called my contact at Costa Rica Customs, Maria Santos, who'd worked with our airline for years. Maria, this is Phil Henderson from the airline. I need to report suspected money laundering and fraudulent property purchases by American citizens. Phil, of course I remember you. What do you need? I need asset freezing and investigation of property purchased with stolen American pension funds. The buyers are planning to flee the United States to avoid prosecution. Send me everything. We take international money laundering very seriously, especially when it involves stolen retirement funds. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Calvin had been planning his escape with Hazel for 2 years, and felt something I hadn't experienced since before their theft began: complete control over my own financial future and legal standing. Calvin came home at his usual time, carrying the same briefcase that had contained evidence of his Costa Rica planning. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked, but his voice lacked the confident manipulation he'd been using for months. "Very productive," I replied, looking up from the international crime evidence files I was organizing. I met with Detective Morrison about elder fraud charges, consulted with airline security about international money laundering, and coordinated with Costa Rica Customs about asset seizure. Calvin's face went ashen. Asset seizure? International money laundering prosecution, systematic pension theft charges, and Costa Rica property confiscation. Detective Morrison was very interested in the financial records, your text messages with Hazel and Eugene, and my airline industry connections for international asset recovery. For the first time in 33 years of marriage, Calvin looked genuinely terrified. The confident man who'd been orchestrating my systematic theft looked like a criminal whose perfect international escape plan had been exposed by his intended victim. "Phil, we can work this out. We are working it out through international law enforcement and criminal prosecution. Tomorrow morning, you, Hazel, and Eugene will be arrested for conspiracy to commit elder fraud and international money laundering." The flight attendant had become the crisis coordinator, and the emergency response was comprehensive. They'd tried to steal a pension from someone who'd spent her career managing international operations and maintaining professional networks across multiple countries. Now they were about to learn what happened when aviation expertise was applied to financial crime investigation and international asset recovery. My 65th birthday party arrived at the community center with the same 40 family members and friends who were expecting a retirement celebration. But this time, the conspirators didn't know they were walking into a confrontation orchestrated by someone who'd spent 35 years managing airline emergencies with precision timing and flawless execution. "Mom, you look different tonight," Jessica said as she walked into the decorated hall, where I'd positioned myself with strategic precision near the head table. More confident. "I'm feeling very clear about tonight's celebration, sweetheart," I replied, placing my leather briefcase on the table with the same authority I'd once used during airline crisis management. "Clearer than I've been in 2 years. Calvin entered with Hazel beside him, as they always did when attending family events, as the concerned husband and devoted family friend everyone believed them to be. Around the room sat the same. My 65th birthday party arrived at the community center with the same 40 family members and friends who were expecting a retirement celebration. But this time, the conspirators didn't know they were walking into a confrontation orchestrated by someone who'd spent 35 years managing airline emergencies with precision timing and flawless execution. "Mom, you look different tonight," Jessica said as she walked into the decorated hall, where I'd positioned myself with strategic precision near the head table. "More confident." "I'm feeling very clear about tonight's celebration, sweetheart," I replied, placing my leather briefcase on the table with the same authority I'd once used during airline crisis management. "Clearer than I've been in 2 years." Calvin entered with Hazel beside him, as they always did when attending family events, as the concerned husband and devoted family friend everyone believed them to be. Around the room sat the same airline colleagues, neighbors, and extended family who'd watched my retirement adjustment struggles. People who'd witnessed my confusion about financial planning, while Calvin and Hazel systematically stole my pension. "Before we begin the celebration," I announced, my voice carrying the professional authority that had commanded respect for 4 decades, "I have something important to share with everyone." Calvin started to interrupt. "Phil, maybe you should—" "Sit down, Calvin." The command in my voice stopped him mid-sentence. "Everyone needs to hear this." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the organized evidence files, spreading them across the table like I'd done countless times when presenting safety reports to airline management. For the past 2 years, Calvin has been conducting an affair with Hazel, while her father Eugene systematically stole my $340,000 airline pension to fund their relationship and planned escape to Costa Rica. The room fell silent, but this time, the silence belonged to me. "These are financial records showing systematic pension theft disguised as retirement planning." I held up the documentation. "These are property deeds for Costa Rica real estate purchased with my stolen money. And these are recorded conversations between Calvin, Hazel, and Eugene planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could steal my remaining assets." The family members and airline colleagues who'd sympathized with my retirement difficulties were now staring at the conspirators with growing horror. "But it gets worse," I continued, pulling out the text messages. Here's Hazel writing to Calvin. "Mom, Phil is so trusting and generous. Sometimes I almost feel bad about taking everything from her. But then I remember how much fun we'll have spending her money in Costa Rica." Jessica's face went white as she realized her best friend had been systematically destroying her mother's life while calling her mom and accepting maternal love. "Detective Morrison has reviewed all evidence. Criminal charges were filed this afternoon for systematic elder fraud, international money laundering, and conspiracy to commit pension theft." I looked directly at Calvin, Hazel, and Eugene. "The arrest warrants are being executed now." But the most devastating moment came when I addressed Hazel directly. "Hazel, for 10 years I treated you like a second daughter. I funded your education, took you on family vacations, and loved you like my own child. You repaid that love by stealing my husband, my pension, and my retirement security while calling me mom and planning my financial destruction." The shame and shock on the faces around the room was palpable, but I wasn't finished delivering accountability. "Jessica, your best friend has been manipulating our entire family for 2 years. She's been sleeping with your father, stealing my life savings, and planning to abandon us both with nothing while she and Calvin start their new life in Costa Rica." But the most powerful moment came when Detective Morrison entered the community center, exactly on schedule, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers and an international crimes specialist. "Phil, are these the suspects?" Detective Morrison asked, looking at Calvin, Hazel, and Eugene with the professional disgust reserved for people who exploit family relationships and steal retirement savings. "Calvin Henderson, Hazel Morrison, and Eugene Morrison," I confirmed. 2 years of systematic pension theft with international money laundering and complete documentation. As the handcuffs clicked into place, Calvin looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Genuine recognition of exactly who he'd been trying to steal from. "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Morrison began, but Calvin was staring at me with the dawning realization that he'd tried to defraud someone who'd spent her entire career managing complex international operations and maintaining professional networks across multiple countries. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the room, "tonight's coordination has been flawless, not because of luck, but because of 35 years of aviation expertise that no amount of manipulation could actually destroy. Jessica ran to my side, tears streaming down her face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Hazel was doing this to you." "Sweetheart, you're not responsible for her choices, but now you understand why I've always taught you to judge people by their actions, not their words." The birthday party that had been planned as my public humiliation had just become the setting for complete justice and family protection. Before we continue celebrating, I announced, "I want you to know that my retirement is more secure than ever. Thanks to my airline industry connections, we've recovered the stolen Costa Rica property, frozen their international assets." 18 months later, I stood in my renovated home office where I'd first analyzed the financial records that exposed Calvin's pension theft conspiracy. But everything had changed. The woman who'd once questioned her own retirement planning while being systematically robbed was gone, replaced by someone who'd reclaimed not just her financial security, but her entire sense of purpose in protecting others. The legal proceedings had been swift and comprehensive. Calvin pled guilty to systematic elder fraud and received 28 years in prison plus full restitution. Hazel faced charges for conspiracy and manipulation, sentenced to 20 years for her role in the generational exploitation. Eugene lost his financial planning license and received 25 years for systematic pension theft. But more importantly, the entire aviation and financial planning communities now understood exactly what had been done to Phyllis Henderson. 18 months later, I stood in my renovated home office where I'd first analyzed the financial records that exposed Calvin's pension theft conspiracy. But everything had changed. The woman who'd once questioned her own retirement planning while being systematically robbed was gone, replaced by someone who'd reclaimed not just her financial security, but her entire sense of purpose in protecting others. The legal proceedings had been swift and comprehensive. Calvin pled guilty to systematic elder fraud and received 28 years in prison plus full restitution. Hazel faced charges for conspiracy and manipulation, sentenced to 20 years for her role in the generational exploitation. Eugene lost his financial planning license and received 25 years for systematic pension theft. But more importantly, the entire aviation and financial planning communities now understood exactly what had been done to Phyllis Henderson. "Mrs. Henderson, it's Detective Morrison," came the familiar voice on my phone. "I wanted to let you know the final restitution payment came through. $340,000 in stolen pension funds, plus $400,000 in damages and international asset recovery. Your case is officially closed. $740,000. Not just recovery, but justice with compound interest for systematic elder fraud and international money laundering. Detective, this case has become the international standard for pension theft prosecution, hasn't it?" "Ma'am, in 25 years of financial crimes investigation, I've never seen a victim build such a comprehensive case against systematic elder fraud with international implications. Interpol is using your coordination methods to train investigators in cross-border financial crimes." After I hung up, I sat at my desk, the same desk where I'd organized evidence that saved my retirement and exposed their conspiracy. But now it held something different. Correspondence from the International Association of Flight Attendants, requesting my consultation on developing protocols for detecting financial exploitation, targeting airline retirees. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Jessica, holding her newborn daughter and wearing the peaceful expression of someone whose family had been restored to honesty. "Mom, I heard about the final settlement and the international consultation offer. How does it feel to be the most respected elder fraud expert in the aviation industry? Like I'm finally using my crisis management expertise where it matters most," I said, taking my granddaughter in my arms. "For 35 years, I handled airline emergencies. Now I'm preventing financial emergencies for vulnerable retirees." Jessica smiled, though her expression still carried the weight of someone who'd learned hard lessons about trust and manipulation. "The Airline Retirees Association wants to establish the Phyllis Henderson Protocol for detecting pension fraud. Your case has changed how the entire industry approaches retirement security." The Phyllis Henderson Protocol, using the systematic theft I'd survived to create protection for other airline retirees who might be vulnerable to financial exploitation by family members and trusted advisors. Tell them yes, I said without hesitation. If my experience can prevent other families from being destroyed through pension theft and generational manipulation, then something meaningful will come from those 2 years of systematic robbery. That evening, my former supervisor, Captain Martinez, came to visit. Something that happened regularly, now that the truth about my retirement difficulties was public knowledge and my professional reputation was fully vindicated. Phil, the airline executives have been asking me something. They want to know how you figured out such sophisticated financial fraud when even industry professionals were fooled by the systematic deception. I considered the question carefully while rocking my granddaughter. I stopped making excuses for financial patterns that didn't match my aviation training and started trusting my professional instincts. 35 years of crisis management taught me to recognize when emergencies were being deliberately created rather than naturally occurring. Captain Martinez nodded thoughtfully. The Federal Aviation Administration wants you to head their new Retiree Protection Task Force. Your case has shown them how trusted advisors can weaponize retirement planning against successful aviation professionals. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The woman who'd once doubted her own financial judgment now spoke with unqualified authority about elder protection and fraud detection. My attorney, Margaret Chen, stopped by later that week. Phil, I have to ask, how did you maintain such detailed financial documentation throughout the theft? Most victims don't have nearly this level of evidence. 35 years of aviation trained me to document everything systematically. But more than that, I learned to trust my professional instincts when financial patterns didn't make sense, even when everyone else was accepting the theft as legitimate retirement planning. Margaret smiled. The American Bar Association wants you to develop training programs for detecting elder fraud in professional communities. Your case has changed how attorneys approach financial exploitation targeting successful retirees. The ripple effects continued expanding. The National Association of Flight Attendants invited me to create protocols for protecting airline retirees from family financial abuse. 3 business schools requested permission to use my case in their fraud prevention and crisis management curricula. The Securities and Exchange Commission asked me to consult on detection methods for systematic pension theft. But the most meaningful transformation was internal. The voice that had been systematically silenced through financial manipulation was now stronger than ever. If this story resonates with you, I said into my phone, recording a message for the Elder Fraud Prevention Program. Remember this, your professional expertise doesn't disappear when you retire. Your ability to manage crises and analyze complex situations doesn't diminish when family members use your trust against you. Your right to financial security doesn't expire when you become vulnerable to those closest to you. I paused, thinking about the woman I'd been 18 months ago, questioning her own financial knowledge while being systematically robbed by people she loved. I spent 35 years managing airline emergencies and coordinating complex international operations. I had to learn to apply those same crisis management skills to my own family when the emergency involved systematic theft by my husband and the young woman I'd treated like a daughter. The people who truly love you don't steal your retirement security. They don't use your maternal instincts as weapons against your financial independence. Real family protects your future and validates your professional expertise. The recording would be used in training sessions worldwide, helping other aviation professionals and retirees recognize when their expertise was being weaponized against them. As I hung up the phone, I realized the most profound change wasn't in my circumstances, it was in my voice. The woman who'd whispered questions about retirement planning now spoke with the authority